Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Brad Kam, co-founder of Unstoppable Domains. Hailing from Atlanta, Brad studied international politics in college before dropping out to focus on entrepreneurship. In 2012, he moved to San Francisco and took up residency at a rundown hacker house called 20 Mission, which is where he first learned about crypto. In 2018, Brad co-founded Unstoppable Domains, which currently has more than 2.7 million domains registered and has achieved unicorn status with a $1 billion valuation. Brad, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. So I'm wondering if we can jump right to that hacker house experience, because from my understanding, what I heard you talking about on another podcast is that horror movies were actually filmed there. So what brought you there in the first place, and what was that experience like for you?
So I had a friend who moved there, and I knew one person in San Francisco, and he lived in this building and said, you should come get a room here. It was this was in December of 2012. It's a co-living building. So there were, I think there's maybe 20 people there at the time. It peaked at like 40, one set of bathrooms, one kitchen. And there were a whole bunch of early crypto people. There was a Bitcoin channel that was launched in the basement in 2012. There was a Bitcoin exchange that was also launched, I think, in 2012. I think they went live before Coinbase. Don't quote me on that. It was close. And then Catalogue gave a talk in the courtyard, I think, before Ethereum went live. There's a video of that. So all of these people were involved in the crypto space. There were meetups, all this sort of stuff. So I had heard of crypto one time. I read the Wired article from 2011, like many people, but that was it. And when I moved to the city, it was just crypto from all sides. I read the white paper maybe a week after I moved, started going to events. It just almost immediately kind of, consumed my mind. And, it's been like that ever since.
So you kind of answered this next question a little bit, but maybe you can give more details around your entry into crypto. When you first heard of it, did it kind of, did the light bulbs go off right away, or was it a little bit like, what's this all about? And maybe it caught on later.
So I read the article. I read the Rise and Fall of Bitcoin article in 2011. I read it maybe a few weeks after it came out. And I was following tech a little bit, but not in the industry yet. And so I remember thinking like, oh, that's interesting. I don't really understand finance very much. So I think I probably spent 5 minutes on it and didn't really come back to it until I came to San Francisco. And then, I've always had to sort of rely on some of my more technical friends for, helping to point me to like, what really is like the next, tech platform, the next computing platform. And they were all saying like, it's crypto. And my lens on it, I've never really been super interested in finance. I've actually gotten more interested in finance because of crypto, not the other, it didn't really capture my interest before, but I always came from a sort of political perspective, studied, various international political issues, went to grad school, as you mentioned, came away with this belief. I was studying mostly like a lot of things around international corruption, and came away with this belief that like there is really just no way things are going to get fixed in that world. So like just kind of give up, leave DC. Like there will definitely not be change coming from this direction. It's going to need to come from some other direction. And I didn't have a plan for that. I was thinking, tech is, a place where innovation is. It's a place where things are getting better. So I'll do that. And then I saw Bitcoin and I was thinking, wow, like this is actually getting to the core issues that we have in politics, which is around corruption, lack of trust in institutions and governments, et cetera. and Bitcoin went right to the heart of that. So there was something, I was primed to love it. I had been like looking for something like this without really knowing what the thing would be. And I was thinking of it in political terms. So I didn't necessarily expect it to be a technology innovation or a financial innovation. That was the part that I had to kind of wrap my head around early on.
And what about your thoughts? I mean, you've been around this space for a long time. You've seen the evolution of the various blockchain technologies. What are your thoughts on where things have come, just how far they've come, where they're at today versus when you first entered the space?
It's probably like for every major new technology trend, where like you're imagining, like in the 1990s with the internet, like, you're imagining that you're going to immediately have, food delivery. In the 1950s, you were imagining like, we're definitely going to have flying cars. Like by the time I have grandkids, we're definitely going to have flying cars. And so you kind of imagine these more like fantastical things. So I think early on in crypto, everyone was thinking like, there's not going to be Visa. Like there's not going to be all these banks. Like none of it's necessary. Like it's just going to be crypto payments for everything. And like that didn't happen. Like barely at all in the past 10 years. And I think that's been very surprising. Like I definitely thought that crypto payments were going to go much more mainstream earlier on. And then on the other side, we've got like NFT art, and we've got all of these other crazy innovations that blew up, and those kind of feel like the flying cars sort of thing. But we weren't expecting those at all. Like, so I don't think anybody was thinking like, yeah, physical art is not going to be a thing. Blockchains are going to do that. I didn't know anybody talking about that. So all of these, I think that's probably normal. It's very hard to predict the future in this major way. And I think the way you predict the future is by looking at the past. And the immediate past was, hey, there's Bitcoin. People were using it, I think, mostly for, things that you couldn't pay with credit cards for on the internet, especially early on. But it was a payments use case. Whether, no matter how you feel about that use case, it's a payments use case. And so I think people were extrapolating from that, like, well, payments are working, so like that's going to be the thing. So I think the technology waves can really surprise you in that way.
We're recording this November 22nd. The release date's going to be early to mid-December. What we've just witnessed over the last couple weeks in the crypto space has been chaotic, to say the least. We're not going to spend too much time on this point because things are changing so fast, and who knows where we'll be by that point. But just in general terms, kind of a follow up to what Alf was asking about how the space has evolved and things you've seen over the years. What's your kind of general feeling or sentiment to the space right now? I mean, obviously, regarding a centralized exchange and all of the drama that happened with FTX. But just what's your feeling right now on the ground in crypto?
Well, I mean, I think that you get a little battle tested over time. There's just so many of these extreme ups and downs in a way that under other industries, I think they just don't have these kinds of cycles. Like every 4 years, everybody goes from, massively wealthy to like broke, and like, needing money for taxes. And so like, it's just such a life of extremes inside of crypto that I think the extremes kind of stop surprising you over time. Like the specifics always surprise you, like, oh, wow, it was FTX or whatever. And like, that's surprising. But the fact that we blow up on ourselves because we got too greedy, that's just a human thing. That's a human problem. I don't know what's wrong with us as a species, but for whatever reason, we just always get overexcited. And then we need to snap back and recover from it. And I think we always wind up better on the other side. But yeah, it's like a really weird thing about human psychology. Like we just always trick ourselves. And I feel it personally. Like personally, during each bull market, I'm thinking like, wow, we've really uncovered this thing. And like, this really is going to just keep on going, and it never does. But we all get so wrapped up in it every time. So yeah, it's just that's an amazing thing. But I don't respond to the chaos maybe in the way that a lot of folks do, because I think that what happens during the bull market is there's just so many sketchy narratives that start coming out. There's like, we need the 10,000th blockchain that, uses this kind of new whatever, and that's going to change the world. Or, like we need the 500th collection of animal pictures, like 499 weren't enough. We have to have 500 of them. And each time this happens, and I found that a little frustrating, that there was this, it kind of felt like people had found a recipe. They're like, oh, this is like a recipe that works for marketing purposes. But that's not what the people before them were doing. They were building what they thought was, future technology for the world. And then other people look at that and they're like, oh, well, I can do marketing like that. I can build a product similar to that. And then there's thousands of them. And that leads to this crazy bubble where people get super confused and super tricked. So when the market resets, in some ways, I feel like we're kind of getting back to where we should be. The setting aside the chaos and the hurt and the pain and the lies, all that stuff. This is not the morality of it, just how it feels when you're actually working in the industry. There's a real distortion during those bubble times.
What about the fact that, you talked about this 4-year cycle? Most people are familiar with the 4-year cycle theory and history as it's played out. But what about being in a bear market like we are now, where you look at the sort of the greater world economy, and we're in recessions globally, and there's other factors. It's not just in the crypto market in our cycle. Do you think it's different this time in any way because of those other factors, if you look at it, from a greater perspective?
Probably. Yeah, probably it's going to be harder for people to be optimistic about new tech over the next few years, even when the value of crypto is, when it's a bargain to get into crypto. I think there's still going to be this other pain. But that could actually be long-term good for crypto, because there's less competition. And in the wave, like during the last recession, actually right before the last recession, I was working on real estate companies, of all things, even at a mortgage company in 2008. So very, I was, felt like I had a front row seat to that crash. And what I saw immediately after that crash was all of this crazy opportunity and innovation in tech. And that was kind of like 2009, 2010, like the darkest time in the economy, was a time where Facebook was just expanding massively. They were opening up their social platform. Everybody was building all these apps on top of it. Like it felt like a gold rush for software developers around social. And that was happening during just like the most depressing period in the economy that I can think of in my lifetime. So I don't want that to happen again, but I'm just saying that when you're in downtime, but you're doing something that's actually moving the ball forward, moving humanity forward, like it's easier. It was way easier for Facebook to grow outside of all of these traditional media incumbents, because everybody else was hurting or distracted or whatever. And they were the place where the action was happening, where the innovation was happening. I think that could be where crypto is in a year or two. And that's going to be a really, really strong place to be. So that could actually launch crypto further and faster than otherwise, because all the traditional financial players and everybody else should, in theory, be in a worse spot. So we'll see.
Switching gears a little bit, I'd love to jump in to focus on unstoppable domains. And maybe let's start off with just the origin story of how did the idea for this come about?
So the concept of naming on the blockchain goes back to, I believe, 2011. There was an attempt on Namecoin. Those Bitcoin meetups in San Francisco, people were talking about abstracting crypto addresses as a fait accompli. Like it will definitely, like there will not be mainstream adoption with these crazy long addresses. Like we're definitely going to have some sort of name or something. And I think that was kind of like commonly accepted amongst a lot of people that I knew and that I spoke to during that period. So I'd been primed to believe that this would eventually be a thing. I think that it was hard pre-smart contract blockchains. And so the part of the origin was Ethereum went live. Ethereum started building real apps. the concept of NFTs came about that looked like the right format for identity, for identifiers. And so Matt, my co-founder, had this idea of why don't we make identity into NFTs? We didn't use that term at the time. But why don't we make them into these blockchain assets that users will be able to control and trade and move around? And that can be the future of identity on the internet. And it's going to have a very clear early use, which is crypto users don't want to have all these long addresses. So that was the starting point. And we thought it was going to be about crypto users and crypto addresses for a while. And then eventually we were going to move into just general identity for the internet. But what wound up happening is that identity actually the identity for the internet features wound up being where the users were going first, or not first, but very early on. That's been where the demand is coming from to a large extent. So we were kind of surprised how that went.
And so when we talk about like an unstoppable domain, or just let's say Web3 domain versus Web2 domains, what I guess technologically is the main differences? Because front facing for the user, I mean, it looks the same, right? It still just looks like a domain. How does it actually operate that makes it, a different domain than the traditional ones we're used to go to, your typical websites?
So the key thing is that this is a asset on a blockchain that you own and you store it in your wallet. So unlike a .com domain that you rent from a traditional domain name registry and they store it for you and have all these different rules, that domain lives on a database somewhere that somebody can, in theory, delete. This is an asset that you control. It's on a blockchain that no one can take away from you. That's that's kind of the key technological difference. And because it's an asset on the blockchain, when an app wants to go and find a record associated with your domain name, they read the blockchain instead of DNS servers. Like that becomes like the new DNS server, so to speak. They're primarily for consumers and not for businesses, which is also quite different. And it's because the use cases are very, very broad. Yes, you can build a website with them, but what most people are doing is attaching their crypto addresses so that you can send crypto. They are logging into dApps and sharing a digital profile that they've built. Now, Unstoppable has some tools to make this really easy. And the idea is that you can tie certain information about yourself to your domain name. And then you've got this kind of like, your domain name is kind of like your username. And then you've got these profile pages. And the combination of those two together, that's kind of like decentralized social media, decentralized identity profile. So you need both. You need this username that's going to work across all these different apps and all these different contexts. And then you also need your data to come along with you in some way that's super easy. And so we built this login tool that makes that super easy. So with dApps, you can log in with your domain name, and then you can share certain of your profile information. And the whole idea there is that apps are going to give you special experiences based on who you are, based on certain attributes that you have, maybe even give you a special offer based on certain things about you. So
there's a few different endings to them. You've got .crypto, .nft, .wallet, .x. What are the differences with those?
So the idea from a technology perspective, they all work quite similarly. The idea is that there's not going to be one domain ending for the internet. These are so broad. Like we're talking about your Venmo handle, your potential phone number in the future. We hook up VoIP to your domain name, your DM, your social media handles, all of these different use cases. It's unlikely that you're going to use just one, and that just one is going to be relevant to every single person on the planet across every different context that they might use it. So .wallet associated with payments, that's probably going to be a little bit more focused on some of the payment related use cases, not exclusively, but somewhat. .x can be kind of like the new sort of social media type name. .nft for people who are NFT enthusiasts. We tried to focus on a lot of different communities because there are a lot of different communities that identify differently and are going to use the domain names differently. So from a technology perspective, maybe not so different. From a use case perspective, you can actually see them potentially getting used for different things.
You talked about this being very sort of consumer focused right now, and users are getting these domains primarily for their own use cases as an individual. But do you see this growing more and expanding more into business use cases? Or do you think that it is likely to stay more sort of consumer focused?
I think we got a long way to go with consumer because there's maybe around 400,000, a little more than 400,000 people who have domains. And there's more than 4 billion people that use the internet regularly. So I think that consumer market is really big. I think eventually you will also have businesses. Part of the reason businesses do claim domains right now, and sometimes they do some things with them. Sometimes they hook up crypto addresses. There's other things you can do around, connecting smart contracts and being able to prove that you own a certain smart contract. You're the developer of a certain thing. So there are things that people are doing, and also profiles and verified profile information. So there are reasons for businesses to use it, but the tools that businesses want around their digital identity, permissions, complicated permission schemes, there's just going to be just a lot more stuff, and so we just don't think that's the first market that's going to adopt. The other thing is that storage needs for consumers are simpler, smaller, et cetera. So consumer is just so much easier that we just thought the tech was ready for that now. We might be 5 or so years away from businesses really being able to go wild with it.
Do you get much of an issue, or is there a problem with poaching of domains? Like, are people getting as many of the popular names as possible, and are there any protected ones that are untouchable at this point?
Yeah, so there's a really long list of domains that are associated with brands, and we've gone out of our way to make sure that those domains are saved for those companies, as well as popular individuals. And the reason why is obviously we want them to adopt, like we want them to use it, but we also don't want there to be a whole bunch of scammers and people, showing up and pretending to be somebody and tricking users and all that stuff. And this is something that's pretty well developed in the traditional domain name world around protecting brands. We actually try to go further, try to protect more than even you would in the traditional world, just because you own them forever. So there's really nothing that there's no way to get a domain name back if the wrong person winds up getting it somehow. So we went to kind of great trouble to do that. That's been a huge advantage because the domains are available for the brands that want them, and it also just protects the whole ecosystem. In terms of are people buying more than one domain? There are whales. There are domain whales, just like any other just like traditional domains and just like other crypto assets. So there are people that own hundreds or whatever. There are some people that have tried to buy up some of the more valuable ones. All that stuff I think is fine. It's kind of it's fine in a healthy market. So that sort of behavior is not is not problematic for the ecosystem. The thing that you really need to do though is protected domains. And there's also just a category of dangerous domains. Domains associated with terrorism and other types of nefarious activities. That you probably just want to avoid having people register. Why make that easier than it otherwise had to be? So we also just burned a bunch of domain names that were associated with that sort of stuff.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode.
So how does it compare? This might be something, honestly, I just don't know how this works, but in the traditional space, we've seen over the years, new top level domains get released. And I don't really know how it works from, your end of things, procuring those in the first place. I imagine you don't just go create them. How do new top level domains come about, like the .cryptos, the .x's, the .nfts, and will you continue to sort of expand that catalog to continually offer more? And just on that same token, what about the more traditional ones like .coms, .nets, .bizes, .cos? those things that will be Web3 domains at some point too, or no? That's kind of like, it is what it is.
So for the domain endings that we launch, we were trying to identify the ones that we thought could be really big, important domain endings for the crypto space primarily. That's mostly what we were focused on, but maybe some that could also be more general. So we launched, I believe, 9. There is no like officiant body that decides who owns a Web3 domain ending. There is in the traditional world for DNS servers called ICANN. That doesn't exist in our world. So it's really a bit more about ensuring that it doesn't exist, ensuring that it's something that is a brand that you can actually build a brand around, and something that apps will support. And so you kind of figure out from the stakeholders what makes sense. We are not in the business of launching tons of them. We think we've got some of the top ones in the market. The area that you will see us do more in is around corporate domain endings for for specific brands, and that'll be a way for them to kind of like what email did in the 1990s, where you had a Gmail or an AOL or whatever, and it wound up being a brand that shows up in your competitor's app. When you go and you use the competitor's app, your brand still shows up. So that's something that I think there's going to be a lot more of, but there's probably going to be thousands or lots of these. You asked another kind of big question around traditional domains and what's going to happen with them. Right now, they are doing a thing that is quite different, which is domain names for identity for businesses that default works for websites in every major browser. And Web3 domain endings don't have that yet. They don't have that kind of native support across Chrome and some of the biggest browsers. So they have kind of an advantage in the business domain name space. And how it goes, I do think that the markets are going to converge eventually. That Web3 domain names will eventually move into the business use cases, and some of these traditional domain name registries may try to launch, convert their systems over into Web3 domain endings as the tech continues to surpass what they're currently using, and what they're currently using is 30 years old. So I think that's a very realistic thing to happen. There's a lot of politics in that industry, so we haven't seen them changing at a rate that I think a lot of the industry players would like. But the new trend that's happening, and there's a domain name conference that happens every year that we go to and we speak at, is that they're all getting interested. Like they all saw NFTs blow up, and then they saw Web3 domain names, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like our world, but on the blockchain. This is super interesting. And so now everybody's really paying attention. They want to sell domain names. They want to try to learn about the product. So I think you're going to start to see the industries converge a lot more. We started to see that a lot over the past 6 months to a year.
So when it comes to something like Ethereum name service, which probably a lot of our audience would be familiar with, do you kind of consider them, are they a competitor in a way? And what are the differences between .eth, or is it just a different ending?
Yeah, I mean, friendly competitors. We support them in a lot of our, in our tech. The industry is super new, so there are technology choices that we made are different. So, for example, we're on Polygon, so it's very, very cheap to do transactions. We think that's just important for usability. You also own domains forever, no renting. And we're just trying to go after what I think is the bigger market, which is every internet user. And some of them are not going to care about Ethereum. They're definitely not going to want to pay large gas fees. And there's just going to be lots of different domain endings. I don't think there's not going to be one here. There's going to be lots. So those are probably the biggest ways. But we built an early version of the product as a registrar for ENS, and then determined that actually the bigger opportunity is in going and capturing some of these other markets that were not being addressed.
You mentioned earlier how there's lots of use cases for how to apply your unstoppable domain, and that those use cases, it sounds like, really depend on like the dApps that adopt them and how they integrate them. Do you have any ideas as to where it might go? Because it sounds like it's quite, it's quite the sort of blue ocean, and that who knows where it could possibly end up. With traditional domains, it's like traditional domains are for going and visiting websites. That's kind of what they're for. You don't really expect it for anything else. But in this space, it seems like we're only at like the tip of the iceberg, and maybe there's a lot of use cases that really haven't been figured out just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably some white space, although in the 1990s, the domain name industry sounded a lot more similar to the Web3 domain name industry now than the current domain name industry is. They thought they were going to be consumer identity. They were pushing everybody to build their own website as your identifier. Email was tied to your domain name or tied to a domain name as an identifier on the internet. What wound up happening was social media apps wound up kind of eating the personal website. So consumers didn't wind up using domains that way. But you're starting to see a lot of you can go back and you can see a lot of those themes. They didn't have payments, which was important. And there's some other tech reasons why that didn't happen. But I think to answer your question directly, payments is sort of a home run use case. Authentication is a home run use case. Blockchains are just better at authenticating because you're not relying on some company's server. Like you're relying on a private key secured by a blockchain on your device, and that's just better security. So just that alone, that's kind of the core of the reason why identity makes sense on the blockchain is you sign a message in order to log into an app, and then you're permissioning information, and that just works better than the traditional methods do, and is easier to interoperate. It's open source.
How far away do you think we are from, let's say, the majority of people owning an unstoppable domain?
So I think we're probably 2 to 3 years away from the majority of crypto users. And then I think we're probably, 5 to 10 years away from, regular internet users. There's a lot of tech that needs to improve. Right now, Polygon's amazing. Right now, I think we could handle, something like 10 million active users or some number like that. So like the underlying blockchain tech has to catch up. And it will. I'm very confident it will. I think it's getting better quickly, but it's not ready for 4 billion internet users yet. And it takes a while. These rollouts are, they're multi-decade rollouts. And I think that's what we should expect for core pieces of the new internet too.
And then in terms of the secondary marketplace volume and that type of thing, is that something that's significant in terms of people flipping these different domains? And added to that, are you aware of like what the highest sale is on the secondary market for a domain?
There's definitely domains that have sold for tens of thousands. There are also, several domains that have sold primary and in the tens of thousands of range. So it definitely happens. There's a healthy secondary market, just like there is for any NFT category. It's not something that we focus on that much. I think it's a thing that users like to trade. Users like to collect. They like to trade. The one thing that I think that's kind of nice about Unstoppable is that you own the domain names forever. So unlike a traditional domain name or even unlike an ENS, your collection never goes down. It only goes up if you wanted to. So I think that can help create a little bit more of a long-term behavior, which I think is would be the hope. Use it, play with it over the long term rather than try to flip it. I think rentals can kind of trigger that flipping behavior a little bit more. So it's fine. It exists in all asset classes, but not the focus.
A follow-up to that, you mentioned that the renting behavior maybe triggers that, but on the flip side, is there drawbacks in the ownership side, obviously for the user, like, hey, I bought it, I own it. I mean, that's great. Nobody's going to argue that. But what about when it comes to those who are looking specifically just to say purchase up domains with the idea of, selling them on the secondary market down the road at a greater price because it is you buy it, you own it. Those individuals can just buy and sit back and wait. And there's literally never any like future cost to them. Whereas in the renting situation, it's kind of like, how long do I want to hold on to this inventory? It's burning a hole in my pocket. I got to offload it or sell it, Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, why would we do the thing that's not best for the user? Like, what is our job? We are building technology for users. Why would we build them an identity that they should build up and rely on, that they could accidentally forget to pay for and then lose and it goes to someone else? That's a terrible, terrible thing to do to users. So of course not. Why would we do that? And that was actually how we came to it. Was we were thinking like, okay, renewals are it was novel to say like there's no renewals for a domain name. We couldn't even find any examples of that when we did it. We were just thinking like, but the conversation was, okay, what should the renewal price be? And then we were like playing around with models. And then we're like, wait a second. Why do we want a renewal? Like that sucks for users. Why would we do that? Why would we do that to the users? And then we're like, okay, why don't we just get rid of it? And we got rid of it and people went berserk. They loved it. So like, obviously, I think that's better. I think there's been an argument that there's some sort of scarcity, like you're going to run out of domain names, which is just mathematically absurd. Like there's just billions, trillions, whatever. So like that is it just doesn't exist. I think it was an argument that was concocted by people who were already invested in a system that had rentals that they then needed to justify after that investment. It doesn't seem like a first principles analysis of whether or not renewals are good. And if you're worried about supply, you could set up a mechanism, or like, recovery, you could set up a mechanism where like the domain goes into a smart contract. And if, something doesn't happen once a year, then it goes back to this address or whatever. So you could set up a mechanism to where if you lose your domain, it can be recovered in all sorts of different ways. So it sounds like a justification for somebody that likes their subscription fees.
For sure. I mean, like, trust me, I think it's great. And like I said, I'm sure most users would. I think I'm not trying to argue why would you set up subscriptions. It's more, and I guess again on the scarcity side of things, it's not that well there's not enough domains. It's what about the fact that there's always going to be that desire for those short domains, for single word domains, for things like that are short, easy, memorable, brands, names, whatever, things like that. And it's more like, is there anything to sort of protect users, or is it sort of the same where it's like the trade-offs are worth it? The pros outweigh the cons, and it's not something to worry about.
Yeah, the trade-off's definitely worth it. The pros definitely outweigh the cons. I think this problem, I'm confused by why people think this problem is so big. Like, are people most Bitcoin is not lost. And Bitcoin has been around for a long time. Like most Bitcoin, there is like things like 30% or something high like that. But like if 30% of domain names disappeared overnight, would that kill the system? I don't think so. Like why? I think that all of this comes back to rationalizing why we're paying this fee in the first place to the registry that likes fees. So like I think that's the starting point, and then from that comes, well, I need to come up with some arguments. Because the argument is just like I don't know. I just don't see why that's a problem for anybody other than the person collecting the rent.
In terms of, we touched on this earlier in the interview that you've been around this space for a while and that you're battle tested. You've seen the ups and the downs, but I'm wondering just in general, building in a bear market, how does that compare? I mean, does that impact what you're trying to build at Unstoppable at all? Like, is it tougher to build during this time, or what's your experience been?
It does change the go-to-market a good bit. Like you can do, I think in general, you kind of put a lot more resources into some consumer marketing during the bull markets because it works. People want to hear about crypto products and they want to try them. And then during the bear markets, you tend to focus a bit more on partnerships. And that's a really good time for investing in distribution channels and partnerships. So we're very focused on integrating with every crypto wallet, crypto exchange, and DApp. And during bull markets, it can be harder because there's always some new DeFi protocol that wants to pay the millions of dollars to get in front of their users in some way. And during the bear market, it just kind of gets back to the fundamentals. Like if you can provide value for my users and what you're doing makes sense, so all of that becomes way easier. So you'll see us, just at least internally, we'll focus a lot more on partnerships and getting integrations. Not that we don't do that in the bull market, but that's kind of the big shift that happens. And when we launched this company, we actually went to market in January of 2019. I think ETH was like $130 or something like that when we launched. Like it was considered a depressing time in crypto when we launched, and that was great in some ways because people were open to things that were not bad, things that were actually providing value, that were not part of the whatever the like ICO token boom that didn't work. And so, I think that those are the cycles that happen. And I think this time, people probably got a little bit overloaded on all the lending stuff, and apps and exchanges and et cetera. We're really, really focused on that. And now they're gonna want to do different stuff. And so that's great for companies that have a long-term view. So bear markets are way easier to build in, way easier to grow in a lot of ways. I don't want to sound I don't want to sound joyful about it. Like it's good that people lost money. It has nothing to do with that. But as an entrepreneur, it actually, it cuts through the noise. Like the people that are still around doing stuff, like it tends to be real stuff, which I enjoy.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that completely. There's something that seems more genuine about a company launching in the middle of a depressing bear market and making it work throughout that time. Going back to the topic of these partnership conversations, what do those look like? Because to me, it seems like it wouldn't be a hard sell. I mean, something like Unstoppable Domains, you'd want that to integrate with your app and to make it easy for users and to offer that. Do you ever get pushback when you're in these conversations? And if so, what is the resistance to having that integration?
Yeah, so you're not. So when you show the tech to a crypto wallet or an exchange that has these send fields, they're like, yeah, obviously, like if I go look at my customer support, like everybody's like, something's wrong with the address, I sent to the wrong address, whatever, like that, like they're very very aware of the problem, and they're now aware of the solution. So like they tend to be pretty excited. The things that we tend to be looking for are, okay, how do we not just integrate, but how do we like get domains into the hands of your users? And that tends to be a little bit heavier lift. Like maybe there's some, product flow that's built, there's marketing campaigns associated with it. There's some labor. And so you're typically competing not with like, is this a good idea or not, but with, is this the thing that we should do next? Or, should we do this DeFi protocol, or should we do this other thing? And so you're mostly competing for attention with a host of other crypto services that they could be focusing their users on. And we have sort of a unique thing where domain names don't work inside of apps unless we convince them. And domain names don't work at unstoppabledomains.com, really. They work inside of these third-party apps. So we want our users to go to your app. So that's something we can offer. That's good. And then we also want the app's users to get a chance to get domains, have an easy way to get domains. And that's going to bring them onto our system. So that's kind of the general trade. Everybody's very open. Everyone's trying to integrate with everybody. So it's very easy to kind of get in the room, and it's mostly about time and attention. And then every now and then there's something else, like crypto politics. Like I want to be on this blockchain versus that blockchain, and like that could be another. The tech stacks, everybody being on different tech stacks is another broad limitation.
On that note, I'm sure that the same challenges make this something that wouldn't be so easy right away, which is, what about in the future? Do you see domains being provided almost, whether it's by, whether a purchase is involved or not, but as like a user we talk about it as identity. So what about as like your user handle for, say, social media? What if you go sign up to Twitter, and part of that process, part of that onboarding and just creating your account is choosing your unstoppable domain. And now you get your domain, which is both your login and your user and your wallet and your handle for that social media platform. Obviously, there's a lot to that. You just got to be able to understand this stuff. And that's probably the bigger hurdle. But do you see that as a potential in the future for unstoppable domains?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the thing that we need in order for the tech to work is we need some sort of crypto wallet or, crypto wallet connection, Connect Wallet or crypto wallet built in. And that's really it. And traditional consumer fintech companies have been building those, PayPal and SoFi and others. And then social media apps have already been building out their Connect Wallet functionality. So they basically have what you need in order to do it. And that's Twitter, Instagram, Reddit. Like it's basically everybody already has the necessary ingredients to where the tech could work. I think the thing that is going to be interesting to see is how do some of these traditional social media apps play with these new username systems that could in some ways bump into some of their existing username systems. So it's kind of like which social media apps are going to decide to really open up, right. To say like, I want my users using my identity system inside of other apps, which is different than how they operate today. Like they're mostly about, twitter.com, et cetera. So that's kind of a business model change that they would need to make. I think they're going to see it. I think they're going to see why it's good. And they have this really, really valuable thing, which is they have all these user profiles. Like they have 15 years of everything I've tweeted, or, in Reddit, 15 years of everything I've debated. Huge, huge value that they have built up. And then the question is, are they ready to open that up and allow users to walk around on the internet with that? And they haven't done it yet, but I think the crypto community is going to be able to convince them because I think it'll be very good for them. I think they have something that's really valuable. They don't necessarily need to have this closed system anymore in order to make money.
And looking to the future, we asked a question and talked a bit about, how long it will take and when you see unstoppable domains being sort of like massively adopted. But what about the other side, which is we also talked about, you mentioned the future of potentially more traditional domains and Web3 domains sort of converging on each other is maybe a likely future. At what point do you think that might happen? Like how far out is this potential convergence along with the mainstream adoption of everything?
I think it's probably a little ways out. I think it's so much easier to build on the net new tech stack than it is to integrate with the old one. And like, I think this just happened. Like you just realize this so many times when you're building on new tech. Like when you build using crypto stuff, everything's so easy. Like, you're connecting wallets, you're like doing all sorts of stuff, all sorts of blockchain based interactions, like building as a dApp. Then you want to go and add Stripe for payments. That's where everything gets tricky. There's just so much more complexity pulling in the old system into the new. And so I think that's the problem you always have when you're on the older tech. And so it's going to be easier for us as an industry to build on primarily crypto rails for things for a while. And I think we're probably going to see that for a while. Once it just leaps ahead of the old industry, that's kind of when they're like, okay, it's worth the trouble to go and migrate. Like once you all are bigger than us or almost as big as us or whatever. And that'll happen, but that's not quite there yet. I think there's like 300 million traditional domain names or something like that. I don't know the exact number. We have almost 3 million domains registered. I bet there's sub 10 million overall in the Web3 domain name space right now. So we've got a ways to go. But the nice thing is our market's a lot bigger because we're going after 4 billion internet users, not just, the couple 100 million or whatever business users.
Well, Brad, this has been a really interesting conversation. We appreciate having you on because, I've personally been a fan of unstoppable domains for the last couple of years, and it's something we haven't been able to educate our audience about. So I think this episode's been super valuable. With that said, we have a segment on our show that we ask every single guest on Show Me the Crypto called You Had Me at Crypto. It's 3 rapid fire questions, and Ulf is going to ask you those.
All right, Brad, you ready for it?
Mm-hmm. Let's do it.
All right, the first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Ooh, I don't have a single person. I mean, I'll mention a couple then, I guess. I mean, I follow Vitalik. I think I just really like I like all of his ideas. I follow Brian from Coinbase. I think he kind of lets you know what's going on the regulatory side. Kind of big picture. I think that's really great. I follow Pump. I think he's just like real. So like what you get from him is real and filtered, in a way that I think you don't hear that kind of perspective in crypto as much. But honestly, I follow hundreds of people, actually hundreds, because I want a wide variety of perspectives. I'm not a person that has a lot of people on pedestals. I like a lot of people, but I don't have them up on pedestals. So I'm more likely to try to pull from as many different random places as I can. And right now there's like some of the best crypto investigative journalism I've ever seen in my life. So I am like very hooked right now on a variety of investigative accounts that are just, thank you for all that you do. You're doing some absolutely amazing stuff. Autism Capital is one. FUBAR is another. There's several. So anyway.
Vitalik, I think, is the most popular answer we've had to that question. Brian Armstrong, though, that's the first mention of Brian from Coinbase. So I like that. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Second question here. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
I have absolutely no clue.
No one does. We're going a decade out. It's a decade out, so you don't need to worry.
Okay. So a decade out. So let's go. So we're going to go two crypto cycles out. So that means we'll go,
and we'll be in a bull market.
Right. So let's say maybe like 400 to 500K. I don't know.
I appreciate the thought you put into that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Third question. What is the most underrated coin or project in all of crypto?
Other than Unstoppable Domains.
Other than Unstoppable. Right. Let's see. I mean, everything that I would probably say is somewhat obvious. So I don't know how undervalued they are. Everything feels pretty valued these days in crypto.
And you can go after, just to give you some inspiration here. Sometimes it's easier to say like, hey, this whole sector of crypto is underrated too. So whatever you think.
Yeah. So here's a random one that I just like. I think the Pudgy Penguins are quite good as an NFT project. I found a lot of what went really mainstream over the last cycle to be like relatively niche, actually, but niche for kind of like the crypto insiders. And there was kind of a particular aesthetic for a particular gender maybe, and there were some other things about it that I felt like they felt very niche to me and didn't necessarily speak to me. Whereas, like, who doesn't love penguins? And so I just think that there's something much more, much more welcoming about that. And I've been to some of the events and stuff like that, and it's actually just kind of like a funny, pleasant group.
Love that answer. Well, Brad, thank you so much for joining Ulf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.